They say betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from family. That's a lie. It cuts deepest when it comes from the kids you once carried on your shoulders. Kids who used to run up the porch steps screaming, "Grandpa," and now whisper about selling your life out from under you. That night, the walls of my old farmhouse carried more than the sound of the wind. They carried words I was never meant to hear. "Liam, once Grandpa signs those papers, it's over. We put him in Meadow Pines, unload the land, and finally get out of debt." My grandson's voice, smooth, certain, the kind of tone a man shouldn't have when he's 23 and talking about his own blood. "Yeah," Jake replied, lower, nervous. "But what if he doesn't sign? He's stubborn as hell." "Then we make him. He's slipping anyway. Everybody knows it. One doctor's note, and the state won't even ask questions." I was frozen halfway up the stairs, my hand on the banister I built with these same hands 40 years ago. The oak felt colder than usual, like the wood itself knew it had just been reduced to a dollar sign in my grandson's heads. The air smelled faintly of the apple pie I'd baked earlier, still cooling on the counter. Ellen used to say my pies were too heavy on cinnamon, but the grandkids loved them. Funny thing, I hadn't seen either Jake or Liam touch a slice tonight. They were too busy whispering after dinner, heads bent together like conspirators in some cheap crime novel. "You really think the place is worth $500,000? Jake asked. "Easily. Developers have been sniffing around. We could sell in weeks. Pay off my loans, get you that truck. Hell, maybe even move out of this dump." This dump. My dump. The same house where their mother learned to walk, where Ellen and I spent nights fixing leaks and sanding floors, where Christmas mornings once felt too full for the walls to hold. I stepped back into the shadows, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they'd hear it. My knees shook, not from age, but from rage. Upstairs, the hallway light flickered, the old bulb on its last legs. I leaned against the wall, cold plaster against my back, and let the betrayal settle in. They thought I was weak. They thought 74 years meant confusion, meant vulnerability, meant I wouldn't notice the way their voices tightened whenever money came up. I noticed. When I finally moved, it wasn't toward the kitchen where they still whispered. It was toward my bedroom. The floorboards creaked, but I didn't care. If they asked, I'd say I was just heading to bed early. Let them think the old man had gone deaf. In the drawer of my nightstand lay a folder Ellen always teased me about. "Your treasure chest," she called it. Bank records, deeds, insurance papers, the bones of a life built on sweat and calloused hands. I pulled it open. The edges of the documents were worn, smudged with fingerprints, but every line was still sharp in my memory. That's when I saw it. A sheet out of place. Photocopies of my checking account. Not in my handwriting, not in my order. Someone had been through my things. Charlie's voice echoed in my memory from just last week. "Grandpa, do you even remember where you keep your safe key?" He'd asked it casually, too casually, like a man tossing bait in the water. Now I knew. They'd been digging already. I sank onto the bed, the mattress groaning beneath me, and stared at Ellen's photo on the dresser. Her smile was soft, her eyes sharp. She always saw through people quicker than I did. I could almost hear her voice. "Don't you let them treat you like a burden, Walt. Don't you dare." I rubbed my temples, forcing myself to breathe slow. Anger is fire, but fire uncontrolled just burns down your own house. Downstairs, laughter burst. Quick, nervous, too loud. Jake covering up guilt with noise. Liam's bass chuckle following. They thought they were in control. They thought old Walter Harris had no teeth left. I stood, slid the folder back, and closed the drawer gently. My reflection in the mirror looked older than I remembered, lines deeper, hair thinner. But my eyes? My eyes looked the same as when I was 30 and fighting for every inch of land the bank tried to take from me. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay listening to the old farmhouse breathe around me, every creak and sigh suddenly louder. Betrayal changes the way a house sounds. By morning, I had decided one thing. They wanted to treat me like dead weight. Fine. I'd let them believe it. I'd nod, smile, shuffle around like a tired old man. Let them think they'd already won. And while they celebrated, I'd be digging the ground right out from under them. Because no one, not even my own blood, steals my life and walks away smiling. Morning light spilled across the fields like a blade, slicing through the fog and into my kitchen window. I stood there with a cup of coffee, black and bitter, watching Jake and Liam stumble out of the guest room, hair messy, voices thick with fake cheer. "Morning, Grandpa," Jake said, grabbing a piece of toast without asking. He always did that, like the house was already his. "Sleep well?" I asked. My voice was calm, maybe too calm. Ellen used to tell me I sounded dangerous when I was quiet. "Like a rock," Liam muttered, pulling out his phone, scrolling before his eyes were even fully open. The glow of that screen reflected in his smug little smirk. I studied them while I sipped. Two boys I'd once rocked to sleep, now grown men plotting to bury me alive in a nursing home just so they could sell what I built. They thought I didn't know. That was my advantage. The first step in any war isn't swinging fists. It's gathering intel. I'd spent 30 years negotiating contracts at the factory, catching tricks hidden in fine print. This was no different, except the enemy had my last name. By noon, when the boys drove off in Liam's rusty pickup, I opened the desk drawer in my study. Sure enough, the papers weren't how I left them. Insurance policies shuffled, tax returns stacked sloppy, my bank records copied. And tucked under the pile, a folded sheet that didn't belong. It was a draft. A damn petition for guardianship, my name already filled in, half the lines typed, some scribbled in pen. They'd been planning to claim I was unfit to manage my affairs. A couple of signatures from a doctor, maybe a lawyer, and suddenly my choices wouldn't matter. I held the paper in my hands, the edges trembling, not from age, but fury. That's when I decided every move from here on out would be documented. Their words, their lies, their faces when they thought no one was watching. That evening, when Jake came back early, I was ready. He walked into the kitchen, tossing his keys on the table. "Grandpa, do you ever forget stuff? Like bills or medicine?" My chest tightened, but I forced a slow nod. "Sometimes," I said, letting my voice wander just a bit, like an old man slipping. His eyes lit up, greedy little sparks. "See, that's what I was telling Liam. You shouldn't stress yourself. We could handle things for you. Help with the bank, the house." I leaned on the counter, masking the recorder running in my shirt pocket. His words flowed easy, rehearsed, like he'd practiced in the mirror. "Wouldn't you like less worry, Grandpa?" I let silence hang, the kind that makes men overplay their hand. He filled it right on cue. "We could talk to someone, get the papers started. It's just to protect you. You'd still live here, of course." My grip on the counter tightened until my knuckles went white. Protect me. The same boy whose diapers I changed now wanted to protect me out of my own home. I gave him a thin smile. "Maybe you're right. I'll think on it." That was enough to make him relax, grin wide, pat my shoulder like he'd just pulled one over on me. But in my pocket, every word was already recorded. Later that night, I sat in my study with the blinds drawn. The farmhouse smelled of dust and cedar, and the only light came from the lamp Ellen once insisted we buy, the one with the brass base shaped like wheat stalks. On the desk lay two piles. On the left, what I had. Photocopies of my accounts, clearly touched. Draft guardianship petition. Jake's recorded attempt to push me into signing. On the right, what I needed. A doctor willing to vouch I was perfectly capable. Legal advice on how to seal the house in a trust. Proof of the boys' debts, the reason they were pushing so hard. I stared at the lists, the smell of cold coffee in the air, and felt that old factory grit settle in me again. They thought Grandpa Walter was soft. They thought he'd hand over everything with a shaky signature. They'd forgotten I was the man who once stood up to a corporate board and forced them to keep 100 workers employed when they wanted to cut corners. I didn't bend easy back then. I sure as hell wouldn't now. The next morning, Liam made the mistake of bragging on the phone in my living room. He didn't notice me in the hallway. "Yeah, bro, once Grandpa's and Meadow Pines were golden. 6 acres? Developers will eat that up. Easy cash. I'll finally pay off those guys." No more hiding calls. Developers. Debt. Collectors. The picture was coming together. I stepped back into the shadows, my phone recording again, and thought, you boys want to play grown men with my life? Fine. Let's see how you handle when the old man plays back. There's a certain kind of silence that settles in a house when you know the walls have listened to treachery. It isn't peaceful anymore. It's watchful. For 2 nights, I barely slept. I lay on my back, listening to the wind scrape the siding, the farmhouse settling, and downstairs, Jake and Liam whispering like rats in a grain bin. Every sound made me sharper, not weaker. By the 3rd morning, I was ready to move. Not to strike, not yet. First, I needed to see how bold they'd get if they thought I was slipping. I started with the pills. At breakfast, I shook 2 little aspirin into my hand, but I let one roll across the table, bouncing against Jake's coffee mug. Oops, I muttered, fumbling with my fingers longer than I needed to. Guess these old hands ain't what they used to be. Jake's eyes gleamed. He picked it up, set it by my plate, and said real soft, "That's why we worry, Grandpa. You can't keep track of this stuff forever." I gave a shaky laugh, the kind that made me sound closer to senile than steady. You're probably right, son. Probably right. But inside, I was counting. Counting the seconds it took him to glance at Liam, to exchange that silent message. He's halfway there already. Later that afternoon, I forgot my checkbook on the counter. The one I'd already drained into another account weeks before. I watched from the porch as Liam picked it up, flipping through the empty pages, his thumb stopping at the carbon copies of old checks. His grin was thin, hungry. He slipped the book into his hoodie pocket like I wouldn't notice. I noticed. I let him keep it. A test balloon. I wanted to see what he'd do when he thought he had a weapon. That night, I placed my old safe key back under the dresser lip. Except this time, it wasn't the real one. Just a brass copy I'd had cut years ago as a backup. A fake key for a fake sense of victory. Sure enough, when I came upstairs later, the dresser drawer wasn't flush. The copy was gone. I smiled into the dark. Let them think they'd cracked the vault. By the end of the week, the boys were strutting. Whispering less, laughing more, acting like I was a lamb led to slaughter. Jake even had the gall to say, "Don't worry, Grandpa. Once you're settled in Meadow Pines, you'll have folks looking after you full time. No more stressing over bills." I gave him my best grateful nod. You boys always know what's best. Inside, my blood ran ice cold. I had their voices on tape now. Liam talking about developers. Jake hinting at Meadow Pines. Both pushing me toward papers I'd never sign. But a man doesn't just defend. He counterattacks. That Saturday, I invited Pastor Graham over for coffee. The boys didn't expect that. While they slouched in the living room, pretending not to listen, I spoke loud enough for every word to reach them. "Pastor, I've been thinking. I might put this farm in a trust. You know, make sure it goes where it can actually help people. Maybe the Veterans Fund or the church." The pastor nodded, unaware of the show I was staging. "That would be a fine legacy, Walter." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Jake stiffen. Liam's jaw clenched. I sipped my coffee slow. Let them stew in it. Let them wonder if the house was already slipping through their fingers. That night, Liam cornered me in the hall. "Grandpa, that thing you said about giving the farm to the church, you're joking, right?" His voice cracked, part fear, part anger. I tilted my head, eyes tired but steady. "Why? Does it matter?" He swallowed hard. "It's just, you know, family land should stay in the family. Family takes care of each other," I said softly. "That's what I always believed." The silence stretched between us. He didn't answer. He couldn't. By the end of that week, I had what I needed. Proof they'd stolen my checkbook. Proof they had the fake safe key. Recordings of their talk about developers and nursing homes. And now, evidence of panic when I mentioned giving the land away. They were unraveling faster than I expected. I sat at my desk that Sunday night, the lamp throwing long shadows across Ellen's photo. I whispered to her, like I had so many times since she passed. "They think I'm playing checkers, sweetheart. But I'm setting up chess." The old farmhouse groaned in reply, as if it understood. The storm broke on a Wednesday. I came in from chopping wood behind the barn, sweat cold on my back, and found Jake and Liam at the kitchen table. Papers spread in front of them, their heads close together like gamblers studying a crooked hand. They froze when they saw me, but not quick enough. I caught the bold black letters across the top of the page. Petition for guardianship. My name right there in block print, like I was already a half-dead man. Jake shuffled the papers together, too slow. Oh, hey, Grandpa. We were just, helping with some forms. Forms, I repeated, setting the axe down by the door. Must be important. You boys look like lawyers all of a sudden. Liam forced a laugh. It's nothing. Just paperwork for insurance. I let my eyes linger on the stack, then looked at them, one by one. The silence stretched until Jake's jaw twitched. I smiled faintly, slow and tired, and reached for the coffee pot. Good boys, I said softly. Always looking out for me. They relaxed just enough. That told me everything. That night, I laid my own papers out in the study. The real deed to the farm. The trust documents my lawyer friend in town had drawn up 2 years ago, after Ellen passed. He'd called it a safety net. I hadn't wanted to think about it then. Now, it felt like a loaded gun tucked under the bed. One signature, and this land was untouchable. But it wasn't just about saving the farm. It was about teaching those boys a lesson they'd never forget. The next morning, I staged my next test. Over breakfast, I rubbed my temples, sighing heavy. Boys, my head's been spinning lately. Can't seem to keep things straight. Jake's eyes lit like a slot machine. That's exactly why we think Meadow Pines would be good for you. Full-time care, doctors, no stress. Liam leaned forward, voice oily. And while you're there, we can manage the land. Make sure it's protected. I nodded slowly, like their words made sense. Then I stood, shuffled to my bedroom, and left the study door wide open. Inside, on the desk, I'd placed the decoy deed, a perfect-looking fake I'd drafted on my old typewriter, stamped with a red ink pad for effect. From the crack in the hallway, I watched Jake slip inside. Watched him fold the deed into his backpack like he'd just stolen the crown jewels. I almost laughed. By Friday, their arrogance was spilling over. Liam came in from town with a grin too wide. Grandpa, he said, dropping into the recliner like he owned it. We've been talking to a realtor. Just, hypotheticals. She says the land alone could fetch $700,000. Hypotheticals, I echoed, swirling my coffee. Jake chimed in, voice cocky. You'd be set for life in Meadow Pines. Don't worry, we'll make sure you get a nice room. By the window. I set my mug down hard enough to rattle the saucer. The sound cracked through the air, sharper than a shout. Both boys flinched. I smiled slow. Window sounds nice. Inside, my stomach burned. They weren't just circling. They were making the first dive. That night, I phoned Marcus Lee, the old lawyer who'd handled my factory pension years ago. Marcus, I said, my voice steady. I need those trust papers filed. Tomorrow. He didn't ask why. He just said, bring me the deed at 9. When I hung up, I stared at Ellen's picture on the mantel. Her eyes seemed brighter in the lamplight, like she knew the tide was turning. Don't worry, sweetheart, I whispered. They think they're playing me. But I've just set the trap. The real deed and trust papers went into my truck the next morning. The boys were still asleep, sprawled on the couch like overfed dogs. By noon, the land was locked. Untouchable. Mine until the day I died, and then destined for the Veterans Fund Ellen had always supported. But the boys didn't know that. They thought they held the deed in their greasy backpack, and I intended to let them ride that illusion straight into ruin. Before I'll tell you what happened next, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. The first crack showed on a Monday morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my black coffee, watching the steam curl in the sunlight, when Jake strutted in like a man with a secret too big for his pocket. He was humming. That boy hadn't whistled or hummed since he was 10 years old and wanted a new baseball glove. Sleep good, Grandpa? He asked, opening the fridge like it was his. Like a rock, I said flatly. And you? Better than ever. He shot a glance at Liam, who was fiddling with his phone, pretending not to listen. They were both terrible actors. I set my cup down slow. You boys look pleased with yourselves. Jake grinned, just planning for the future. I almost laughed into my coffee. If only he knew how short that future was going to be. By Wednesday, I had my answer. The phone rang while I was sanding a chair leg out in the barn. Caller ID, Dalton Realty. My stomach tightened, but I answered, keeping my voice neutral. Mr. Harris? This is Sheila from Dalton Realty. Your grandsons mentioned you might be interested in selling your property? I just wanted to confirm the details before we proceed with listing. Listing. They'd actually walked into an office, holding that phony deed, and tried to sell the farm out from under me. I let a long pause hang heavy, like a man caught off guard. Then I said, "Why don't you send me a copy of whatever you've been shown, ma'am? Just so I can be sure we're all looking at the same thing." She hesitated. "Of course. I'll scan it and email it to you this afternoon." "Appreciate that," I said, and hung up, the chair leg trembling in my grip. They'd taken the bait. Perfect. At supper, I played dumb. "Got a funny call today," I said, spooning stew into my bowl. "Some realtor asking about my farm. Can you imagine that?" The boys froze for a fraction of a second before plastering on wide-eyed innocence. "That's crazy," Liam said quickly. "Must have been a mix-up." Jake smirked into his bread. "Yeah, small-town folks always mixing things up." I nodded slow. "Guess so." But inside, I was savoring every second. That night, the email came through. I clicked the attachment, and there it was, my decoy deed, red stamp and all, scanned neatly into a realtor's system. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the screen throwing shadows across Ellen's photo on the wall. Her smile looked sharper now, approving. "See that, sweetheart?" I whispered. "They're already hanging themselves." The next morning, I set my first trap in motion. I called Sheila back. "Ma'am, I appreciate your help. Just so you know, the document my grandsons gave you isn't valid. In fact, it's fraudulent. I'd like you to hold on to that copy, though. I may need it for legal purposes." Her tone changed instantly, crisp and professional. "Understood, Mr. Harris. We'll flag the file and stop any listing attempts immediately." "Good," I said. "And if my grandsons try again, please let me know." She promised she would. Click. The first domino had fallen. By Friday, the boys were restless. They paced the kitchen, whispered on their phones, snapped at each other. "It should have gone through by now," Liam hissed when he thought I couldn't hear. Jake slammed a hand on the counter. Sheila's dragging her feet, probably waiting on something. I strolled in, wiping my hands with a rag, voice calm as a lake before a storm. "Something wrong, boys?" They spun around, startled. "Too fast. Too guilty." "Nope," Jake said, a little too loud. "Everything's fine." "Good," I said, smiling thin. "Because fine is what I like." I left them standing there, the walls pressing in, suspicion already gnawing at them. That night, I sat by the fire, the farmhouse creaking around me, and thought about the next step. They thought they'd found a shortcut to fortune. Instead, they'd walked straight into a paper noose. But this wasn't enough yet. They hadn't felt the weight of betrayal. Not the way I had. I wanted them to sweat. I wanted them to panic. I wanted them to realize too late that the old man they'd written off was 10 moves ahead. So I started drafting letters. One to my lawyer, one to the sheriff, and one more, written by hand, that I'd leave where I knew the boys would find it. A note that would make them think their whole scheme was crumbling before their eyes. The farmhouse was quiet that Sunday morning, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of quiet you get before a storm. Thick, heavy, waiting to split wide open. Jake and Liam were still asleep when I slipped into the study. The fire had burned low in the stove, leaving the air tinged with smoke and iron. On the desk, I laid out the letter I'd written the night before. Thick black ink. Simple words. To whom it may concern, any attempts to sell or transfer ownership of my property without my direct consent should be considered fraudulent. All documents not signed in the presence of my attorney are null and void. Walter Harris. I placed it in a plain envelope, left it half open on the desk, then stacked a few miscellaneous bills on top. just enough to make it look like something I hadn't meant to leave out. Then I waited. Around noon, Liam wandered in, yawning, scratching his head. I heard the shuffle of his feet stop dead. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. He'd found it. I didn't move from the kitchen, just sipped my coffee slow. A minute later, he came storming in, face pale, but trying to mask it with anger. "What's this?" he demanded, waving the envelope like a weapon. I raised an eyebrow. "Looks like a letter." "You read it?" "Yeah," he snapped. "What the hell, Grandpa? You trying to screw us over?" I leaned back in my chair, keeping my voice steady, almost bored. "It's just a precaution. You boys worry so much about me forgetting things. I figured I'd better make sure no one plays games with my property." Jake came in then, shirt half-buttoned, eyes sharp. "This some kind of joke? You don't need lawyers. We've got everything under control." "Under control," I repeated, letting the words drip with sarcasm. "That's what worries me." The silence after that was so thick you could have cut it with a butter knife. That night, I heard them arguing in the guest room. "You said it would work, Jake." Liam hissed. "That realtor hasn't called us back, and now he's writing letters? What if he already knows?" "Shut up," Jake snapped. "He's bluffing. He's old. He doesn't have the energy to fight us. We just need to push harder." I lay in bed, the recorder on the nightstand catching every word through the thin walls. Their voices came muffled but clear enough, panic laced with desperation. Perfect. The next morning, I pushed them a little further. "Boys," I said at breakfast, stirring my oatmeal. "I had the strangest dream last night. Dreamt someone was trying to steal the farm. Can you imagine? All those years of work, just gone." Liam choked on his juice. Jake froze with his spoon halfway to his mouth. I let the silence do its work. Then I chuckled, shaking my head like a senile old man. "Funny what your brain comes up with, huh?" But my eyes stayed sharp on theirs. By midweek, I had my friend Marcus file an official notice with the county recorder's office. It stated plainly that any attempted sale without my signature was fraudulent and would be prosecuted. A public record, accessible to anyone. That same afternoon, I accidentally left the receipt from the county office on the hall table. When Jake spotted it, his face drained. He tried to hide it from Liam, sliding the slip into his pocket, but I saw, and I let him. That night, the boys were louder. "You don't get it, Jake." Liam's voice cracked through the floorboards. "Those guys I owe. If we don't come up with the money soon, I'm done. They'll come after me." "Relax," Jake snapped. "Once we get him into Meadow Pines, we can force the sale. That letter, that county crap, it won't matter if we've got guardianship. Just a few signatures, and it's ours." Guardianship. So that was the hill they'd chosen to die on. I sat in the dark, my fists clenched, listening. The fire popped in the stove, sending sparks up the chimney. My pulse was steady now. Cold. Focused. They thought the storm was breaking over me. They didn't realize it was forming behind my back, waiting to sweep them clean off their feet. Before bed, I took Ellen's picture off the dresser, set it on the nightstand. "They're cornered, sweetheart," I whispered. "And cornered animals make mistakes. Let's see just how big a mistake they're willing to make." Before I'll tell you what happened next, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. It happened faster than I expected. Thursday morning, I woke to the sound of voices in the kitchen. Not the usual whispers, not the nervous giggles they thought I couldn't hear. These were sharp, clipped, urgent. "Today? We can't wait anymore," Jake hissed. "Are you sure?" Liam's voice cracked. "What if he fights it?" "He won't. He's half gone already. We get him to sign, we take it to the courthouse, and it's over." I eased out of bed, my feet silent on the old floorboards. My hand brushed the wall where Ellen's picture used to hang, now replaced with a plain calendar. I felt the emptiness, but also the steadiness. She was with me, in the bones. By the time I walked into the kitchen, they'd shoved the papers into a manila folder, all casual smiles and fake cheer. "Morning, Grandpa," Jake said, "too bright. We've got something to show you." I poured myself coffee, letting the steam fog my glasses, and turned slow. "Show me what?" Liam slid the folder across the table. It's just a safety thing. For your health. If you sign this, we can take better care of you. Bills, doctors, the house. You won't have to worry about a thing. Guardianship papers. Typed neat, signatures already forged in some places. They thought I'd just put pen to paper, like an old fool grateful for the attention. I stared at it for a long moment, letting the tension stretch. Then I smiled, small and tired. Maybe later. My hand aches this morning. Jake's jaw tightened. Liam forced a laugh. Sure. Later. But I saw it. The crack. The panic. That afternoon, I made my move. I called Sheila at Dalton Realty. If those boys come back with any papers, call me right away. And be ready to call the sheriff. Yes, sir, she said. Her voice carried a new weight. Respect. Then I dialed Marcus, my lawyer. They're pushing guardianship today. How fast can we move if they file? Fast, he said. You've already protected the property. But if they forge signatures, it becomes criminal. You'll want evidence. Evidence, I repeated, glancing at the recorder in my pocket. I've got that covered. Evening fell heavy. The house smelled of stew, though I barely tasted it. My eyes stayed on them across the table, two wolves circling, thinking the sheep was about to collapse. After dinner, Jake leaned back, fake casual. Grandpa, why don't we sign those papers now? Just get it over with. I sighed, rubbed my temples, played the part. Maybe you're right. Let's take a look. Their eyes lit up. Liam grabbed the folder like it was treasure. We moved to the study. The lamp glowed dim, shadows crawling along the walls. Ellen's photo on the desk watched over all of it. Jake slid the papers in front of me, uncapped a pen. His hand trembled just a little. Right here, Grandpa. Just your name. I picked up the pen, turned it in my fingers. Let the silence crawl. Then I leaned back, eyes sharp. You boys sure you want me to sign this? They exchanged a look, quick, nervous. Of course, Jake said. It's for your own good. I smiled slow. Funny thing, I already talked to the county, and my lawyer, and the realtor. Seems they know all about your little plans. The blood drained from Liam's face. Jake's eyes went flat, hard. What did you do? He snapped. What I had to, I said, my voice cold. You thought I was too old, too blind, too weak. But I heard every word. I saw every paper you stole. I even know about your debts, Liam. The ones that brought this stink into my house. The color rushed back to Jake's face, red this time. He slammed his hand on the desk, rattling the lamp. You think you can play games with us? I leaned forward, voice low and sharp as broken glass. No, I already won the game. You just don't know it yet. That night, they argued louder than ever in the guest room. You said he'd fold. Liam shouted. He's bluffing, Jake spat. Old man doesn't have the guts. We push harder tomorrow. But their voices carried something new now, fear. And I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the storm gather in my chest. Tomorrow they'd push harder. Tomorrow they'd make their last move. And tomorrow, I'd crush them with it. The morning came gray and cold, a low mist clinging to the fields like a shroud. I sat at the kitchen table in my best flannel, boots laced, coffee steaming. Calm. Jake and Liam shuffled in, eyes ringed from a night without sleep. They didn't bother with small talk this time. Jake dropped the manila folder in front of me, harder than he needed to. Grandpa, he said, voice tight, enough games. You're signing this today. I sipped my coffee, let the silence stretch, then set the cup down slow. If you're so sure, then let's go do it proper. Courthouse opens at 9. You boys can drive me. Liam blinked, confused. Jake hesitated, then grinned, sharp, hungry. Fine, let's go. The drive into town was quiet, just the hum of the old truck and the occasional cough of the engine. I sat in the passenger seat, eyes on the passing cornfields, hands steady in my lap. They thought I was walking into my own cage. By the time we reached the courthouse steps, the trap was already sprung. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and floor polish. The clerk at the counter looked up, surprised to see me flanked by two younger men gripping a folder like it was a winning lottery ticket. Jake slid the papers across the desk. We're here to file guardianship. Our grandpa's not well. The clerk adjusted her glasses, scanning the documents. Then her expression hardened. Mr. Harris? I stepped forward. My voice carried steady, clear. I'm fine. And those papers? Fraudulent. The boys froze. Two uniformed deputies appeared from the side hallway, Marcus's arrangement. They flanked the counter, hands resting near their belts. The clerk held up the folder. These signatures don't match county records. And Mr. Harris already filed protective notices against fraudulent transfers. Jake's face drained to chalk. Liam stammered. We were just. Save it. One deputy said flat. You're both coming with us. The next moments were chaos. Jake cursing, Liam pleading, the deputies locking cuffs with cold efficiency. I stood there, the courthouse clock ticking above us, steady as my pulse. Jake twisted to glare at me, eyes full of venom. You set us up. I leaned in close enough that only he could hear. My voice was ice. No, son. You set yourselves up. I just built the stage. Liam's head dropped, tears streaking his face. The deputies marched them both out into the morning light, the sound of chains sharp against the marble floor. When the courthouse door shut, silence rushed back in. The clerk gave me a small, respectful nod. Marcus stepped from the side hall, adjusting his tie. Worked like a charm, he said. I exhaled slow. For the first time in weeks, my chest felt lighter. Thank you, Marcus, I said. But this wasn't about winning. It was about showing them the truth. He studied me. You sure you're satisfied? I looked out the window, where the mist was burning off and the sun finally broke through. They called me a burden, I said quietly. Tried to steal the house your Aunt Ellen and I built nail by nail. They thought I'd go down quiet. But now they'll carry the weight of their own greed for the rest of their lives. That evening, I sat alone in the farmhouse, the fire snapping in the hearth. Ellen's photo watched from the mantel, the shadows soft around her smile. I poured a glass of water, raised it in the firelight. To you, sweetheart. They thought I was done, but I reminded them who I am. I set the glass down, leaned back in my chair, and let the quiet finally feel like peace again. Because the farm was safe. My name was clean. And the boys? They'd never forget this day. They wanted my house. Instead, I gave them a lesson carved in iron. Never mistake kindness for weakness.